Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Young and Dynamic. I am super excited to welcome all Dynamites, our HLF and Delta staff, our executives connected from anywhere and everywhere around the globe. My name is Tula Huto, and I'm going to be your host for today. Before we commence this session, let's go through some housekeeping rules. Now, the first thing is make sure you have a notebook and a pen or an iPad, Kindle, tablet, or anything really, even a typewriter is okay, to write notes. A leader always has a notebook and a pen for every meeting. I would like to remind you to ensure that your gadget is on mute and I would like to remind you to ensure that your gadget is on mute at all time, unless you've been asked to speak by the facilitators. In case you're leaving the meeting briefly, kindly switch off your camera and switch it on when you are back. The chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen, is available for your use. We will take note of those comments and will take relevant action needed. Direct any questions you may have to the chat box. We have a team going through the chat box, and they will respond, and they'll be responding to your questions as required. Now, I think we can all agree that last week was sensational, to say the least. Can someone just remind me in the chat box what happened last week? No, I remember we had a video talking about Africa and everything beautiful in Africa. Now I want you to go in the chat box right now and tell me what happened last week. What were the highlights last week? Okay, I'll wait a bit for people to come in and comment in the chat box what happened last week. Okay. Now, while people are commenting, allow me to give this opportunity to Mr. Misharu to lead us into the next segment of our session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tulo, for a warm welcome. Thank you so much, Dynamics, for connecting. And we're taking you through the next segment. Our next segment, I'm just giving an opportunity to our technical team as they are going to show us a video. Over to you, the technical team.
Flooding and landslides from Cyclone Freddy have devastated Malawi, leaving a trail of destruction and loss of life. The cyclone made landfall in the early morning hours of March 14, 2023, bringing torrential rain and winds exceeding 120 kilometers per hour. Lilongwe, Blantyre and Zomba districts have been particularly hard hit, with many houses destroyed and hundreds of people displaced. The government of Malawi has declared a state of emergency, and the military and other emergency services have been mobilized to provide assistance and rescue operations. At least 50 people were killed and more than 1,000 injured, according to initial reports. The death toll is expected to rise as rescue teams continue to search for survivors in the affected areas. Many missing persons have also been reported, and their whereabouts are unknown. Heavy rains caused flash floods that washed away bridges, roads, and entire communities. In some areas, flood water levels exceeded 3 meters, submerging homes and crops. Floods are also causing landslides in hilly areas, adding to the devastation. The cyclone disrupted essential services such as electricity and water, damaged many hospitals and clinics, and left people without access to medical care. The destruction of infrastructure also makes it difficult for aid workers to reach affected communities, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The government of Malawi, in collaboration with international and donor organizations, has launched a large-scale relief effort to assist affected communities. 8 items such as food, clean water and medical supplies have been distributed to those in need, and temporary shelters have been set up for displaced people. President Lazarus Chakwera has declared the disaster state in the southern part of the country and in the now dilapidated commercial capital of Blantyre. About 19,000 people have been displaced in the south, according to the Malawi Disaster Management Authority. Power outages and communication failures in many of the affected areas are hampering relief efforts, a spokesman for UN Secretary-General Stefan Dujarric said at a press conference on Tuesday afternoon. The full extent of the damage is still unknown as the most affected areas are inaccessible. The Malawi Red Cross also plays an important role in relief efforts, providing first aid and other essential services to those affected by the disaster. They work with local communities to identify and support vulnerable groups such as children, the elderly and people with disabilities. This catastrophe has once again highlighted the vulnerability of African countries to natural disasters and the urgent need for preparedness and resistance-building measures. Like many other countries in the region, Malawi is particularly prone to flooding due to its topography and poor infrastructure. Efforts to mitigate the impacts of natural disasters and climate change require a multisectoral approach involving governments, civil society, and the private sector. Investments in disaster risk reduction, early warning systems, and adaptation can help build resilience and reduce the impact of future disasters. The international community also plays an important role in building resilience and helping countries like Malawi to respond to natural disasters. Increasing investment in climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction is essential to protect vulnerable communities and ensure sustainable development. The devastation caused by Tropical Cyclone Freddy in Malawi is a stark reminder of the urgent need to address the impact of natural disasters and climate change in African countries. The immediate priority is to provide aid and assistance to the affected communities, but long-term solutions are needed to build resilience and prevent future disasters. The international community must work together to support vulnerable countries in their efforts to build a safer and more sustainable future for all. Cyclone Freddy has been ravaging southern Africa since late February. Last month also hit the island nations of Madagascar and Réunion as they crossed the Indian Ocean. Cyclone has strengthened its record 7 times, with cyclone energy, ACE, accumulation at a record high. ACE represents the amount of energy a cyclone releases over time. Throughout his life, Freddy logged more energy than any U.S. hurricane in any season. Freddy first formed near Australia in early February and is believed to be the longest-lasting tropical storm on record. The United Nations Meteorological Agency has convened a panel of experts to determine whether it has broken the 31-day record set by Hurricane John in 1994.
Cyclone Freddy made landfall on the 10th of March this year, 2023. It has affected some parts of Malawi. 6 months rainfall was received in 6 days. House, road infrastructure and business were wiped away by floods and mudslides. At least 400 people have been confirmed dead, and thousands are still missing. There has also been a cholera outbreak in Malawi. It is said for Malawi and the rest of Southern Africa. I'm kindly inviting you all to talk about Cyclone Freddy in our social media platforms and raise an awareness. Allow me to pray for Malawi and Malawians as they go through these difficult times. After this time, I also give Karabo an opportunity to pray again for Malawi. Father, thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to kneel down today and gather on this platform as we are talking about an African continent and pray for Malawi. Father, it is difficult for us to experience such kind of difficulties, such kind of disasters. But you are God who have mercy upon your children. Father, you have saved us many times. You have shown mercy upon our lives. You have forgiven our sins. Therefore, God, this time I'm also calling upon you, God, and raising the people of Malawi and the Malawians, the people of Madagascar, into your hands as they are crying, as they are searching for missing people, as they're trying to recover what they have lost in just 6 days, Lord. You are God of grace, God of mercy. I know, God, you will never fail us. I know, God, you will never fail us, God. There are parents that have lost children. There are children that have lost parents. There are schools that have been wiped away. There are businesses that have been wiped away. Therefore, God, I pray today that Jehovah, you ask God, give comfort to those who are crying. Stand with those who need you today, God. For you are God, you are creator. There's no one above you, God. In the name of Jesus Christ, Father, I pray. Amen. I'm giving Karabo an opportunity to continue praying for Malawi. Over to you, Karabo. Jesus.
Thank you very much, sir. Dear God, we would like to thank you for the gift of life, because it is not up to us that we are here today. It's only up to you, and it's only because we are highly favored by you, O Lord. We would also like to thank you for all the battles that you fight for us, dear God, those that are seen and those that are unseen, God. God, please intervene with your healing hand in Malawi. Cure all the people that have been affected, O Lord. We ask for divine intervention. In Jesus' mighty name we pray, amen.
Amen, Karabo. Thank you so much for praying for Malawi. And I continue to call you guys to continue to pray for Malawi and the volunteers that are assisting in the land of Malawi. As we are continuing with our Lift Up Africa series, and today we have been joined with Professor Rukuni. So Professor Rukuni will be taking us through Africa's economic opportunities. Professor Rukuni is an accomplished development practitioner, organizational transformation strategist, an analyst, a coach, and a mentor. He is a Zimbabwean national, and Professor Rukuni is the currently director of BAT Leadership and Doctoral Academy. With decades of experience, Professor Mandi Rukuni has received several honors and awards and published 15 books and more than 100 articles. He has devoted a significant amount of effort as a strategic advisor to the Africa UN in NEPAD programs, including Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, CAADP, land policy initiatives, and also the Rural Future programs. Professor Rukuni currently holds seminars and shares the messages of what is meant to be an African. He has written a series of books, Being African Pathways, among others, which focus on exploring the age-old richness and values of Umpundu as a modern basis for the African Renaissance. Allow me, in all dynamics, let's welcome Professor Rukuni as he is taking us throughout today's session. Over to you, Professor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be among you. At least you're patient enough to still listen to some old people speak, but I do appreciate I'm talking to the future leaders of Africa, and that even in today's terms, you're leaders. So let me go straight into my presentation. So I gather you, when I got the brief, I think my slides are still being rolled up here. But I do gather that you wanted me to, as my slides are coming up, to cover a bit of background in terms of the economic position in Africa, and then what the opportunities are, and what really governments and youth need to do to leverage all this. So as I go into this, let me just start by making it abundantly clear that up until now, Africa is not only the wealthiest continent, and yet the poorest. I would like to say that in background, the youth are still the center of Africa's present and future. Let me give you a few statistics. According to the ILO, out of a working age population of 776 million persons in Africa, at least 286 million are classified as NEET, meaning they are not in employment, not in education, not in any form of training. This actually makes most of the youth in Africa not just unemployed, but also not being prepared for a productive life. So on average, as I say, in today's terms, not only do we have this 286 million people in need, this figure will grow to 375 million by 2030. In today's terms, people are in need, meaning not employed or educational training, are 40% of all youth between the ages of 20 and 24. And this figure is for East and Southern Africa. Zimbabwe's NEET rate is 29%, which is less than the regional average, mainly because of the educational system, not so much because of the employment, but a lot of youth are compared to other countries, in neither education or training. But for young women, the NEET rate is even higher. And in our region, the highest rate is in Ethiopia, where 68% of young women, 20 to 24, in NEET, followed by South Africa at 56%, and then Namibia 55%. Kenya is 53%. So, but let me go back to the facts why we should still remember that Africa is the wealthiest continent. I've given you some statistics here. They call it sometimes the curse of the riches. Africa has 40% of all the gold in the world, 90% of all the world's chrome, 90% of all the world's platinum. It has the largest reserves in diamonds, cobalt, platinum, uranium. It has massive amounts of oil, natural gas, copper, iron, bauxite, silver. Let's put it this way. Altogether, Africa has at least 30% of all known high-value minerals in the world. And Africa has 60% of the world's arable land. So all in all, when it comes to the production of tropical crops, Africa is the largest producer of cocoa, sugar, salt, timber, tropical fruits in the whole world. And I need not tell you that when it comes to wildlife, Africa has the most charismatic of all wildlife found in the world. There is no continent with such charismatic wildlife. The lion is the most charismatic of all wildlife. You've got the elephant, the rhinoceros, giraffe, buffalo, name it. So Africa is blessed. It's not only the wealthiest in terms of material things. It is also the wealthiest spiritually. This is the cradle of humankind, where the human beings evolved from being apes to human. It has the most developed human spirit. Let me fast track on this economic narrative I'm giving you to tell you that my biggest worry is that Africa is sleepwalking into being the largest economy in the world. Let me tell you, we are going to be the largest economy, and because we Africans are still half asleep, we may not even be aware of it. Let me tell you why. Even if Africa was to grow at a moderate rate of 6% growth per year, we're now growing at 3%, our percentage of manufactured goods that we contribute to the world is only 1.5%. And I can tell you that even at that low rate of manufacturing, just through exporting raw materials, we are growing at 3%. If we double up our manufacturing only to a mere 3% of what the world is producing, we will be growing already at more than 6% per annum. So if you look at this table, you will see that, and in this table, what I've done is to give it to you in 3 segments: where we are today, where we are going to be in 2050, and where we are going to be at the end of this century. And you will see where we are today in terms of population. You can see there, Africa is already almost as big as China. And our per capita in dollars is only a mere 2,000, compared to 65,000 for the US and 10,000 for China. By the year 2050, Africa will have an average per capita of 10,000. Okay, if we are growing at 6%. The United States will be 84,000 per capita. China will be 38. However, you will notice that even then, the economy of Africa will be bigger than that of China. 2050, growing at 6%, we will actually be eclipsing both China and the United States already. By 2060, we will definitely have a bigger economy. By the end of the century, Africa will have an economy of $920 trillion compared to China, which will still be at 98, and the United States at 46%. So I can tell you, whether we like it or not, Africa will be the next economic superpower in the world by the middle or soon after the middle of this century. And by 2050, everyone in 5 human beings in the world will be African. And by the end of the century, every 2 in 5 human beings in the world will be African. So whether we like it or not, we'll be the most dominant force, a cultural force, which we already are, already even when we are poor. We're still the biggest cultural force in humankind. So you can imagine, by the end of the century, whether we are aware of it or not, Africa will not just be the economic superpower in the world, it will also be the cultural superpower of the world. Next slide shows you that it has already gave you in fact, I won't spend time on this slide anymore. I already kind of summarized. We can go to the next one. You can also already see that Africa from 2050 will be rising so fast in its per capita growth and economic growth. So next slide. These slides you're going to have so you can spend more time on them. So the important thing for you to know today is something you probably already kind of vaguely know. Now I'm going to tell you in detail why. Whoever controls Africa runs this world. And this has been the case over the last 500 years. And over the last 100 years, we can summarize the three scrambles for Africa and why they happened. First was the direct colonization of Africa starting 1884 when the Berlin Conference was held and the Europeans agreed to slice up Africa amongst themselves. Fast track to the First World War, 1917, until it ended around 1921. That was fought over Africa. Why do I say so? Because the Germans and their European partners were fighting each other on who is going to be the dominant force in Europe, and therefore who would actually control Africa. So the First World War and the Second World War were both fought over Africa, believe it or not. That is the reality. And then after the Second World War, the Cold War between the United States and the USSR was fought mostly in Africa by each one of these two superpowers, basically sponsoring its own dictators on this continent so that they can control Africa. Now today, those two phases are over. We're in the third phase of whoever controls Africa runs the world. This is the most benign phase where both the Eastern countries and the Western countries pretend to be nice to Africa, but all they really want to do is control African resources in three parts. They make it difficult for Africa to manufacture, because without manufacturing, we will never grow this economy, which will be the most time I spend today on this story. As long as we are not manufacturing, and we are only manufacturing 1.5% of finished goods in the world, that has to end. Before that ends, we will continue to be slaves in the world. Secondly, as long as we are not manufacturing, they then buy our raw materials, of which we are the wealthiest in the world. They'll buy them at cheap rates that they're already buying at, and they'll continue to fight over Africa for everything from gold to lithium to name it. Then finally, Africa continues to just be a supermarket where we buy other people's finished products. We will be buying their products finished. We will be hungry for Forex. Forex is like opium. It's just a drug. We are fighting over US dollars because we want to import everything. We don't rely on what we produce. And then we rely on what other people produce. So we're going to be poor for a long time until our manufacturing sector grows. And I'll spend a lot of time explaining why the youth, you guys, are the answer to the problem, but you are not fully aware of it. Next slide, please. So, next slide, please. I've already covered this one. So, the important thing for you to know is that in Africa, every one of the 55 countries in Africa is in a middle income trap. There is not even one country in Africa which is an industrialized high income country. Next slide, please. Why is this the case? This is because we are not manufacturing. This is because we have dual economies where the majority of the people are left out of the manufacturing sector, and the few who participate in supplying raw materials and manufacturing it have to export to make money, because those who are left out of it are not going to be a huge market for manufacturing products. That is why we are in a middle income trap. Middle income trap means urbanization is happening for social services. There is urbanization without manufacturing. There are no jobs in town, but people flock to the cities for social services. They just go there because life is a little easier than in the rural areas. They go there because the network works better, and the clinics have a few more drugs in them. There is no jobs, not even enough housing. So we are urbanizing for the wrong reason. Next slide, please. So the opportunities for growth require me to explain something fundamental for you. You have to understand the processes of structural transformation of society. Economic structural transformation just means you have to understand, even as young people, how a society transforms over a period of 30, 40, 50, 60 years from a basically rural agrarian society to a more manufacturing urban industrial society. That transformation, it doesn't happen by accident. And that transformation means all the social and cultural systems also change. In our case, it's just happening haphazardly because we are not going through structural transformation consciously. When we transform from a predominantly rural agrarian society to a predominantly urban industrial society, every system changes. The educational system has to change and become more industrial. The family system changes so that it is more nucleated. You can go, the legal systems change from dealing mostly with rural family and community issues to commercial issues. But you'll see today that our legal system, as an example, is squarely designed on Roman Dutch law, which is for a fully industrialized society, when we are still really a rural urban society. So what is the solution to a middle income trap? Well, it's massification of the industrial processes. And I want you to grasp this so that you will then understand what your role is, both in government and in private sector. Industrialization is not just building factories. Industrialization is a mindset shift for the whole society. It's a massification. Please stay on that slide. It's a massification agenda because industrialization is the massification of the production system. Please go back to that slide. Mass production of raw materials. Number two, mass processing of raw materials as close as possible to where the mass production of raw material is, and then mass consumption of our own manufactured goods and services. These three processes you must master. These processes usually take a whole day to explain so that you can see where you fit in and where the opportunities are, because we should not be mass producing raw materials like our grains, our oilseeds, our herbs, our meats, and then manufacture them long distances away. They should be manufactured in villages, in townships, in small towns. The big cities grow because the small towns and the villages are growing and manufacturing. We should not be manufacturing trinkets in Harare and snack foods. Put Maputi, this should be manufactured in villages. This is how you grow an industrial society. Next slide, please. So what this means is that you now have to understand the three stages of an industrial process so that you quickly understand that your opportunity as a young people is not confined to ICT and all the nice things about marketing and so on. No, you are in three stages, and we're going to go through these sectors in a minute. But stage number one are what I call the proto-industries. This is how the Asian tigers have grown. The Asian tigers have a sector they call proto-industries. Here in Africa, we call it informal sector. There's no informal sector in Asia. It's proto-industries. It's part of government policy to grow that so-called informal sector. Why? Because they are saying proto-industry is just manufacturing without a factory, but it's a serious process of starting the industrialization of society. Because as you grow the proto-industries in the garages and so on, there comes small machines start coming in to do some food processing, leatherware, textile. Those small machines is what we now call light industries. It's only when light industries grow in the thousands and thousands of small machines in the rural areas, in the small towns, that the demand for heavy industry comes. Heavy industry is the production of the means of production. Steel industry only grows because you have a huge light industry. But in Africa, Not many countries have a huge light industry or a large heavy industry. Even our biggest economies in Africa, like South Africa, Egypt, and Nigeria, they're all in a middle income trap. They are not growing fast. The majority of people are still unemployed. And more importantly, to know that they are still in a middle income trap. I'll give you the example of South Africa. 57 million people in South Africa, only 7 million pay tax. And 55% of South Africans cannot afford 3 meals a day. So it doesn't matter, like Brazil, you export to the rest of Africa and the rest of the world, you export wine everywhere, you are still in a middle income trap. Next slide, please. So here are the industries. When we get from the product industry to the light industry to the heavy industry, this is where your opportunities are, young people. On the left-hand side, most governments and most statistical offices will classify industries in those 4. Primary industries, which is your agriculture and extraction industries. Secondary industries, your manufacturing and your tertiary services. And the quaternary, which is your knowledge industries, like your universities, et cetera, et cetera. And then the quinary is the culture and research sectors. You'll see in the second column there, the main sectors where your opportunities have to come through from light industry to light industry. You youngsters have to be looking for opportunities throughout this: agriculture, fisheries, forestry, mining, quarrying, utilities, construction, manufacturing, right across from food to electronics and chemicals, energy, petroleum, all that, automotive industry, and then you go there in the wholesale and retail trading. Transportation is going to be big in Africa because the whole process of massification, mass production to mass processing, requires agrologistics, it requires aggregation, transportation, warehousing. So these are the key sectors. And going into the third column, you see real estate, professional, scientific, technical services, management of companies and enterprises, waste management and remediation services. Education itself is a big industry if it produces people who understand what I'm talking about, not people who then become unemployed. Healthcare, social assistance, cultural industries are huge elsewhere. In Africa, they are kind of begging industries, but we have to convert them into big time employment and income generating activities. Hospitality industry should be much bigger than it is in Africa because we have visitors from Europe, United States, Australia, Asia, and we are selling them Western products. The world is tired of consuming these Western products. They are coming here because they are running away from the same things we are trying to sell them: Western clothes, Western cuisine, Western entertainment. When they come here, they should be fully serviced with our local products and services at a high quality level. Then the poverty industries is what we're running away from. We are tired of these NGOs, et cetera, but at the end of it all, number 22 is where I'm pointing you to as young people. Don't run away from government services. Don't run away from public administration. You are the ones who are going to transform the public service. You are the ones who are going to understand how to create broad-based, inclusive industrial processes. That's why you should be in government. That's why you should be in public service. Next slide, please. This is Africa Union and NEPAD program that I'm exposing you to because I want you to follow this program. It's only starting. It's called Energize Africa, entirely targeted at harnessing the potential of Africa's youth as the youth transform this continent. Next slide, please. I'll say a bit more about this program in the next slide. You can see there, one of the most important developments on the continent in trying to assist young people get into business are the innovation hubs, or let me just call the innovation ecosystem in Africa. So right now, as we speak, you can see from that map there is last count, which is 2019, 2020, 643 innovation hubs in Africa, all manner of co-working spaces, incubators, accelerators, hybrid hubs, and affiliated private sector, universities, government. All this is growing in Africa. But if we go on to the next slide, we'll show why it's not having a huge impact and why we need to improve this and why the Africa Union is concerned. Next slide, please. Is to tell you the challenges that the innovation ecosystem still faces in Africa and why it's not being able to assist a lot of the young people. Insufficient investment capital, weak infrastructure, especially power and networks, scarce and costly skilled workers in some of the sectors I was explaining to you, scarce and costly high-speed internet, and unhelpful legal and regulatory framework, limited enabling policy environment, and all manner of barriers to business entry, both in the private sector itself and in government. In the private sector, because there are a lot of cartels and monopolies, which makes it difficult to enter in that business. And then in terms of regulations, you've got all sorts of fake standards, making it difficult for startups. Next slide, please. So I believe that both government and youth have a lot to do to leverage these opportunities. And as I said, it all goes back to understanding that whoever controls Africa runs the world. It goes back to understanding that we have to understand structural transformation processes and focus on being able to work at more than one level. So here is probably the most important statement I'm going to make about youth today. You can't operate at one level where you just want to start businesses or be employed. You have to understand that the problem is to be solved at least 5 levels, but you have to focus at least 2 levels. One level, as you are trying to start up a business in any of these sectors I talked about, you must understand that you may be competing with others for the markets, for finance and so on. But at another level, you have to work together in your sector to create a bigger sector, to create a bigger industry, to create a bigger market. So this is the problem in Africa. We think just competing. I start selling my tomatoes at the street corner, and then somebody joins, and then another joins. We're fighting for a shrinking market. No, it's okay to compete. But at the same time, you have to work together to say, how do we grow the sector which you're trying to service? Because it is that constitutes the industrial intelligence. The industrial strategy is for people in a sector to compete and yet growing the sector to a bigger level. I think I've said enough, and I am quite happy to engage in a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. You know, one of the things that you have touched, you said you have to work together as a sector to create a bigger sector. You know, it really touched my heart that we are supposed to work together, especially when we are in a sector. And I'm giving a room to the dynamites we have connected here to continue and ask the professor some questions as he is available to answer your questions. So for those who have questions, feel free to drop some questions in the chat box, and also to raise your hands in case you want to verbally ask your question. For those who have questions, let's go ahead and type in our chat box. I'm giving you 1 minute and few seconds to check if we still have some people in the chat room that have some questions. I see Nkwaki said, thank you so much, Prof. It was a very insightful session. So which means, Prof, people, they have really enjoyed your session and they're in agreement. Their minds have been activated and they've been exposed to certain information. I see there is a comment that is coming from Luke and said this needs to be taught at different. My phone is moving, but this is to be taught at different environments in schools, which means they're looking forward to maybe having access to this kind of information. So, Prof, over to you. If you also have some nuggets that you want to share with us before we move forward to close the session.
Thank you so much, facilitator. As I say, you know, the thing to remember for young people is that honestly, you are not just the leaders for the future, but you're the leaders for today, and that we have reached a stage in Africa where there's nowhere to run to. I mean, if you're used to running to South Africa, very soon it won't be possible to go there. If you're used to running to Europe, the whole world is becoming pretty difficult, because in many different ways, societies have not understood that structural transformation of economies affects society. And if we don't become inclusive enough so that whether it's rural or urban, we are all focused on the same thing. So let me just tell you that don't be afraid to go in the primary industries, but when you go farming, don't just go farming. You must first have line of sight where your product is going to be manufactured. You must already know the different varieties of products that your product is going to go into. Today, my country, Zimbabwe, we produce maize, but only for two products: maize meal to eat, and then animal feed so that we can eat the animal afterwards. Meanwhile, there's more than 20 products you can make from maize through manufacturing. And half of those don't have to be manufactured in big towns. They can be manufactured in villages and small towns. We are importing many maize products in my country, which we could manufacture locally. Starch alone, there's 4 or 5 different types of starch that we're importing for confectionery, you know, for stationery, and so on and so forth. For pharmaceuticals, different types of starch. If we produce maize, the young people should say, whoever produces maize, we aggregate it, we put it together, we start manufacturing these different products within 20-25 kilometers of where you're producing it. Same applies to soybean, same applies to the animals that you're keeping, same applies to your herbs. They have to be manufactured locally. At the end of it all, young people, I understand, we have to make agriculture and rural sector sexy. And I know most of the young people, when we say it's sexy, it just means there's lots of money in it. Well, it will only have lots of money if you add value to it as close as possible to where you're producing it. And I'm available on and offline to continue these conversations with any of the youth in all the sectors that we talked about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. While you were speaking, I received some of the questions, and one of the questions said, who controls Africa now? Since you said whoever controls Africa controls the world. That's the first question.
Yes, because right now as we speak, the biggest competition for Africa is between 3 superpowers: United States, China, and the European Union. Russia comes in a poor fourth. Right now, as we speak, don't fool yourself. This world we are in, the United States, China, and the European Union would want to control the basic raw materials, because when you control the raw materials in Africa, you get them cheapest. From basic metals to the valuable ones, and then to your other raw materials where they then go and manufacture. We don't manufacture. I told you it's only 1.5%. Whoever controls Africa wants to make sure you don't manufacture. Whoever controls Africa wants to make sure that you continue selling to them raw material cheaply. And thirdly, whoever controls Africa wants you to buy their finished products. They buy your raw materials for cheap. They sell you back. We are importing toothpicks, for heaven's sake. We export our timber. We import toothpicks, something you can manufacture in the village. So all I'm saying is, whoever controls Africa's raw materials and trade patterns not only controls Africa, but he has the fastest growing economy like China today, because China has overtaken China in controlling African resources. China is going to grow very fast until Africa wakes up and realizes we in Africa are going to be the next superpower after China, because China is already overtaking the US. We are going to overtake China. If we wake up, we'll overtake China before 2050, before you guys become the presidents of this continent of which you are going to be. But if we sleepwalk into it, it will take us up to 2060, 2070 to have the largest, to be the next superpower. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And also you have mentioned that problem is solved at 5 levels. Can you help us with those 5 levels? Another question to you, Prof.
Every problem is solved at many levels, a minimum of which is 5. So let me give you, let me just take a silly example, but it will help you to understand. In my country, although now it's a lot of the roads are being repaired, but there have been lots of potholes on the roads. Okay, so if you drive on roads with potholes every day, the first level at which you encounter the problem is an event level, because you have to avoid the potholes or deal with them somehow. So you drive around them, or you find a way of ensuring that when your tire bursts because you hit pothole, well, you change from low profile to high profile tires. So that's at event level, and the solution at event level. At the next level is the trend level. The trend is that if you want to actually survive and driving in potholed roads, here's what you do. You avoid this section. You go through the other section, which is not so bad. Then you connect. That's at a trend level. The third level is at a structure systems level. What causes this situation that we have potholes on so many roads? Oh, it's the local government system that has collapsed. Why has it collapsed? It's because the cities, the towns are not economically viable. They are full of people who are not able to pay rates, and they themselves, even when they collect rates, they're not able to pay for basic services. So the roads are going to be full of potholes. So at systems and structure level, it's a completely different problem, and the solution is different. And why did we end up with cities which are not even able to have citizens and ratepayers who can afford to have an economically viable city? Well, it's because when the cities were constructed by the colonials, they were not thinking of cities which will have millions of people in the middle class. It was intended for a few thousand white people who will be in the middle class, and lots of slaves and servants working for them on the farms and in the cities. So the economies never grew. They won't grow. Even the answer to a middle income trap is well beyond just being a good government and not having corruption and good governance. It has to structurally change. So at a fourth level, what created the kind of city system we have, the mental model was a colonial mental model, which says it's more important to have infrastructure that takes things out of the continent. So you got good roads from Harare to Durban and Maputo, but it takes you forever just to get to Dotito or to Buhera. The infrastructure is not made to connect the economy within. It is intended to connect the economy out and in. So at the highest level, what was the vision in your mind, in the people's minds who created the society we have, is what then created the mental model. And I'm going backwards now. So the highest level was the vision in how you create that society, which creates the mental model, which creates the systems and structures, which create then your experience of life and how you have to live from event to event. And then you see trends, and trends are there for you to just cope with the situation and not really strategically solve it. You cannot solve a problem at a lower level than it was created. So you have to know at the level at which the problem is occurring, you go one level up, then you come up with solutions. So I just given you the 5. I usually take a whole day to give you better examples. I just gave you this one quickly so that you do understand that a solution at one level does not necessarily work at another level. You have to analyze. You have to learn to analyze the problem at all the 5 levels so that you go to the highest level to solve it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Prof. You know, when you were talking about infrastructure that has not been created to connect the economy within, that reminds me of failing to access Domboshava, which is 40 kilometers of our
There you go. And yet you can fly to Johannesburg in 1.5 hours.
Yes. Thank you so much, Prof. There's also another question. Allow me to share 2 more questions.
Sure.
The first question says, how can African countries balance the need of foreign investment with the need to maintain sovereignty and protect local industries and workers?
Instead of answering you directly, I'll tell you a quick story. 1994, I went to China. China was not even on the map yet. It was growing fast. But remember, they started growing fast in 1980. Yes. But so 1994, I go there, I go to a conference, and this professor is presenting. And I then discover in his presentation, he's saying China in 1994 then had the highest domestic savings in the world. At the same time, they had the highest foreign direct investment in the world. So then I raised my arm afterwards and asked it, so if you have the highest domestic savings in the world, why do you need foreign direct investment? Then the professor said, oh, you see, that's where you Africans are lost. We don't need foreign direct investment for the cash. We got 3 things we're looking for in foreign direct investment, not cash. The first thing we're looking for is technology. So if you're coming to manufacture in China and you're manufacturing, you want to assemble BMW or you want to make Nikes, we want the latest technology. No, don't give us a washed up technology from Frankfurt. We want the best, otherwise we won't allow you to invest in our country. Number 2, show us your markets. If you're manufacturing Nikes, where are you selling those Nikes? Show us the whole market the world over, because we want to share that market with you, not just to be a manufacturer. You see? Thirdly, we want the best jobs. Any job that Chinese can do won't allow you to bring your people to work here. So the Chinese, even for the top jobs, they would give them a deadline. By such and such a year, Chinese should be running that business. Those are the 3 things the Chinese would demand when they were as poor as us. They would demand foreign direct investment to fulfill those 3 requirements. Then, only then, will they take your cash. In Africa, is the opposite. We want foreign direct investment. All we are looking for is the cash. We don't ask about whether the technology is the latest, is the best for us, is it the most relevant. We don't ask about the markets out there in the world where they're supplying our own goods and services we are going to produce here. We want cash. We chew the cash. In 6 months it's finished. Then we're looking for the next thing that we're going to be selling. So I told you that story so you understand why African governments must unite and ensure that you don't accept foreign direct investment until it is a means for you to accelerate your own manufacturing sector and growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. You know, I feel like rewatching again this session and digest the quality of information that you have shared. And I can see people in the chat box, they are in agreement with what I'm saying. So my last question, Prof, to you is that, Prof, may you clarify a bit on the point you were saying, light industries must be moved to rural areas.
So the most important thing to say, and so if we put it naturally, the natural thing in an orthodox economy, that is an economy that's transforming the right way, is that you manufacture your product as close as possible to where you are producing the raw material. Does that make sense? In other words, towns and cities should not exist. They should only exist because now there's a growing demand to build factories. So the closest you manufacture is what becomes a town. Not the other way around. You build a town first in Harare and then say, go and supply the raw material there. You understand? Cities and towns must be a product of a growing manufacturing system. Not building administrative centers, call them towns, and then you say, go and supply them. So the important point with light industry is, with raw materials, they are the most expensive things to transport around because they are still raw, they haven't been processed. So why do you want to transport them very far before you manufacture them? Why do you want to, Chairman, why do you want to get your maize to go from Dotito to Harare, 200 kilometers, and then manufacture it there, grinding mill, you put it in a truck, drive it back to Dotito. Then you eat sadza pap that has traveled 400 kilometers. For what? You must manufacture these things within 25 kilometers of where you are producing the raw materials. Whether it's cooking oil, pap, flour, herbs, that leatherware, textile. That's what I mean by light industry, because you're just converting initial stages, the early products that are consumed even by the local people. The big cities should be for complicated stuff. The only things we should allow to manufacture in town are electronics and so on, because now it should be expensive real estate. Harare should be so expensive for real estate that you should not be able to run a small factory to do maputi and snack foods. That's why I was saying the countries that have grown fastest, and of late, from Japan after the Second World War, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, and today China and Vietnam, is because they say no. Village and township manufacturing. Produce the raw material, manufacture it as close as possible. Light machinery is simple, it's things you can repair locally. It's not complicated stuff, but the more small machines you have, then the more you demand spare parts for them, then slowly you do reverse engineering. Even if you start by importing the machines from China and India, the more machines you import, the more you realize, why do we keep importing this bearing or this spare part? Now you have your own local foundries manufacturing those spare parts. Eventually you reverse engineer and you make the whole thing yourself. That's how the Japanese did it. That's how the South Koreans did it. And now they're selling as Lexus. That's how they started. Okay. That's only when a heavy industry will make sense, because heavy industry now has a big market of many, many small machines in all the sectors, not just the sectors from mining to manufacturing. Now you find even a small country like Vietnam will have 10 steel mills, okay, because there's a huge light industry. But in my own country, Zimbabwe, when we say light industry, we mean Coca-Cola. Light industry should be way out. Every little town, Chinoi, Banket, Masingo, Mtare, Chifu, oh, that should be manufacturing towns, not commercial and administrative towns.
Thank you so much, Prof.
You can still do it. Your generation can still convert Marondera and the growth points into manufacturing places. You have to do it in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm telling you, you manufacture everything yourself there. And in no time, you'll be exporting that stuff. The Chinese noodles that we're eating, they were manufactured in villages in the 80s and 90s. Until they were fed up with it, they were manufacturing too much, they export to us. They didn't start by exporting the noodles to us. They were manufacturing in the village.
Thank you so much, Prof. When you were talking, I thought to myself, if I'm going to make a biltong manufacturing, I would then station it straight in Bulawayo or Matipelele land, where there's lots of cows there, than to transport.
You make so much money because meat, as the economy grows, people eat more meat, all types of meat. So the meat industry, as long as you're not using too many chemicals, as long as so Bulawayo should be a massive economic city because the cattle there grow naturally. You don't need to feed them. They feed on the natural, and it's the best beef. And the same can be said about, the small ones, goats and sheep. You should be the wealthiest city in Bulawayo.
Amen. Thank you so much, Prof. I can keep talking and talking and talking. We are so excited to host you today on Young and Dynamic. So we'll continue taking down all the questions that will be shared in our chat box, and we will forward them to you. And to all dynamites, let's go and subscribe to Prof's YouTube channel, Dialogue with Prof. My team will be sharing the link into the chat box and also in our different WhatsApp groups. So let's go and subscribe Professor Rukuni's YouTube channel, and let's continue to engage with him. And for those who have also questions, please prepare them and send them direct to our respective WhatsApp groups so that we can also send them and forward to our professor. Then he will come back next week and answer those questions. Once again, thank you so much, Prof. This time, allow me to move to the next segment as I'm inviting Nobantu to give us our weekly announcement. Over to you, Nobantu.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Nobantu, and I will be giving out the weekly announcements. Although I would like to point out how much of a beautiful and productive session this was. Please remember to like, comment, and share the Young and Dynamic post on Facebook and Society channel. Remember to like, comment, and share ABC's Prosperous Minds Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram posts as well. Global Intercessors platform is open 24/7. Remember to connect anytime to pray for yourself and the nation of Zimbabwe and the globe. Remember, we're saving Africa. It's TTFN, ta-ta for now, from me and the Young and Dynamic crew. See you next time, same place. Bye.
Alelele mama, amalala lelele. Oh, shake it for Africa, eh, do it for Africa. Mama lelele, oh lelele mama, oh shake it for Africa. Oh, you rise up and stand up for Africa.
See the whole world be looking at us, yeah, 'cause our land is honey, all the future money, and see Akijima. No, Asilali, Siatandi Mali, they want it, yo, they need it, man, we have it, yes, let the world come and taste this beautiful land, they want it, oh, they need it, yeah, we have it, let the world come and taste this beautiful land,